Hello and welcome to the Peck Pack podcast. Try saying that 10 times fast. to episode 4. We're excited to be here to talk about a pretty sensitive subject today. And we're going to jump right into it. So today we're talking about why we decided to go through and get a divorce and what we feel are valid reasons for divorce, yet things and steps that we can take to hopefully avoid divorce, or that you can avoid divorce if that's something that you're dealing with, struggling with. So first off, we're going to ask Mallory, what are some of the things that led to your divorce and your decision to get out of your marriage?
This is a hard question for me to answer on in such an open and everyone can know kind of a situation, kind of a place. People that are close to me know all the details, but I haven't really shared a whole lot with a whole lot of other people. I've been careful to be really sensitive to my ex and my daughter and what I've shared, but I think it's time to be a little bit more open and share what got us to that point. When I got married, divorce was nowhere in my vocabulary and my idea of what was going to happen in my life. It wasn't really an option. I always said the only reason I'd ever get a divorce is if I was being abused. And throughout my marriage, things got really hard. And it still was not even in the realm of possibilities for me. That's not who I was. That's not what I was going to do. But eventually, about a month before I asked for a divorce, it became very obvious that it needed to be on the table. I needed to consider it. So throughout my marriage, there was a lot of dishonesty, a lot of broken trust in a lot of different areas of our life. And that was overwhelming and traumatizing in a lot of ways. Made it hard for me to trust anybody, made it hard for me to believe that I was going to be emotionally or financially safe in my life, in my marriage, especially at a time where I was going through miscarriages and pregnancy and all of that. I needed that stability and I was not getting it. I didn't have a partner that was going to show up for me, and I didn't have a partner that was going to be honest with me. And that was really hard for me to come to terms with, but I got to the point where I just kind of stopped relying on him, stopped hoping, and reached out to my family. They were the ones that supported me in a lot of different ways that I had hoped my husband would be able to fill that role, but he didn't. But eventually it got to the point where I really felt like things were looking up. I thought that things were getting better. And then I found out some news, and my ex has specifically asked me not to share all of the details, so I'll be respectful of that. But this news that I found out about my ex impacted me, it impacted our daughter, it impacted my extended family, it impacted our whole lives, our financial situation, our home situation, our relationships with my family, our relationships with his family. It shook everything. And it got to the point where I was clinging on as tight as I could. I was just trying to white knuckle my way through this marriage to get to a better point, to get to a place where we could finally have some solid ground under us. And this was right before Christmas in 2024. And I just said, I'm ignoring it. I'm ignoring it until after Christmas because I don't know how to handle this. So I did my best to ignore it so I could have a normal Christmas. But then immediately after, I knew that I needed to separate myself from that situation. It wasn't safe for me emotionally, and I wasn't getting the response from him that I needed in that sort of a betrayal situation. I didn't feel like he was sorry. I didn't feel like he understood the gravity of what he had done. So I moved out. My daughter and I moved out. And then a few weeks after that, I asked for a divorce. And I was really blessed to be able to, we were in counseling, in couples counseling at that time, and I asked for a divorce in counseling. And it was a really interesting experience. There are some parts of that I probably won't share just because it's kind of sensitive, but at first when I asked for a divorce and said I'm done, my ex was like, no, that's not happening. That's not how this works. You're not giving up on this. And then in the 45-minute session that we had, he got to the point where he was like, yeah, we're done. I'm done. I'm ready to move on. So I was blessed, I guess, it was hard and it hurt, but I didn't have to fight really hard for the divorce, but I did fight really hard for the marriage. I'm sure that there will be more details that I'll share throughout this process, but ultimately what led me to my divorce was repeated patterns that were damaging our relationship. My ex being unwilling to change and chronic and constant dishonesty. Do you want to go ahead and share why you got divorced?
Thank you for sharing. I know that's not easy. Before I share, so do you feel that it wasn't necessarily that one big thing that he did at the end? It was accumulation of continuously breaking promises and not fulfilling what he did, what he said he would do.
For sure. It was definitely all of it. I think if it had I think that one thing at the end really just allowed me to see that divorce was an option and allowed me to see that he wasn't changing for the better, that he wasn't gonna make the changes necessary to provide that emotionally safe space that I need.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing. Love you.
I love you too.
So, as you might know, I previously mentioned, I've been married twice already. And the first time I got married, right out of high school, we found out we were pregnant, and we immediately started planning the wedding and got married super fast. And we were married for 7 years. And I remember our first year of marriage, it was so hard. We fought all the time. We never agreed on anything. We never felt like we were good enough for each other. And we just had very little respect for each other. And it was really hard. And that was definitely just as much my fault as it was hers, why we were fighting at that time. And I think that's pretty typical. Maybe not fighting all the time, but if you start a marriage, it's really a big adjustment period to be able to learn the other person's needs and to adjust and figure out their love languages and figure out what's important to them. And it's quite the adjustment period, which hopefully if you've been dating long enough, then you can process through all those things and figure out those important things before marriage. And I really like in the 2007 talk from Elder Oaks about divorce, or I guess now President Oaks, he says the best way to prevent being married to somebody or prevent divorce, a messy divorce, is first marrying, right? Or not marrying a person like that. That's going to put you through that. So ideally, you want to find the right person right off the bat. And I feel like I didn't go through that process in the beginning. And I think she knew that she didn't do that process either. But I had made a commitment to be married, and I was going to do everything that I could to try and be better and to improve and grow. And it was really hard because I feel like we weren't growing at the same level. And that made it hard for me to be respectful of her and for her to be respectful of me, because we were definitely on different spiritual levels. We were on different emotional levels, and it was pretty difficult. Every year we had good moments. However, I think we were just definitely on different levels. And I don't want to talk badly about her because I know I made plenty of mistakes in my marriage. However, I think the difference is I wanted to work on things and she didn't. And she continuously found excuses not to be with me. She found excuses to put other things before me. And eventually she cheated on me. And after I found out about it, I was furious. I didn't know what to do, obviously. And however, I wanted to work things out because I didn't want to lose her. And so I convinced myself that it was my fault, that I needed to work on things. I needed to be a better husband. And so I read books. I communicated with her as much as possible. I did everything that I could to try and be the best husband that I thought she wanted. And by doing that, I feel like I lost a lot of who I was and who I am. I started to turn away from God and put her as a priority over my relationship with God. And it pulled me away from God. And the more I tried to go back to God, then it pulled me away from her. And it was really hard. And we decided, after I first found out that she cheated on me, we decided that we were going to make it work. And so several years later, I found out that she was still continuously cheating on me with multiple men. And she had told me that she wasn't happy with me and she wanted to find out why. And I think that was her excuse of being with other men. She was like, I don't love you, so I'm going to find love elsewhere and then try and apply it in our marriage, which is, looking back on it, is a ridiculous idea. And to me, I wanted to fix our marriage so much that I kept serving her. I kept doing nice things for her. I kind of love bombed her in a way, not because I felt guilty about not being good enough, but because I wanted to show her that I was good enough for her. And no matter what I did, it just wasn't enough. And she continually chose her phone over me. She would rather sit there and watch TikTok all day instead of spend time with me, it was really hard. And I think a lot of it was I let things get hard because I wasn't strong enough in my beliefs and my own self identity, that I feel like, looking back on it, I needed to plant my roots more deeply and be like, this is what I expect in a marriage. This is what I deserve. This is what you deserve. And I didn't do that as much as I should have. I sometimes just let her do her own thing because I was too scared of her pulling away more. And so sometimes I said it was okay not to go to church, or I wasn't consistent in prayer every night, and got into some habits that were not healthy for either of us. And ultimately what led to the final divorce is I couldn't do it. I couldn't pull the plug. And so we talked about it. She had talked about it since year one, kind of jokingly, or all the time. She would joke about getting a divorce, and eventually I think she wasn't joking from the very beginning, but she kept talking about it, and eventually it kind of became a real thing, especially after she cheated on me again with multiple men. And it was really hard because I still wanted to make things work. And I kind of gave her a choice. I'm like, you can show me that you're willing to make the changes and show me that you want this marriage, because I've done everything that I can, everything I've thought of. And I'm willing to work with you. And if there's things I need to work on, then we can work on things together. We can go to counseling. We can figure things out. And she kind of kept going back and forth, where she'd say she wanted to work on things, but she didn't make any actual changes. And then I'd find out she cheated on me again and again. And so eventually I just, like, I couldn't handle it. So I kind of gave her an ultimatum, and told her, I was like, you either have to choose. At the time it was her phone. She couldn't go without her phone because she had all these guys on her phone, all this attention from her phone. It's like, you can give up your phone and work on our marriage, or you can choose your phone and leave my house. And she ultimately chose her phone and all these guys over me. And that was really hard to overcome. Being disregarded like that from somebody who you love and care about so deeply is really hard. And looking back on it, I wish I had the courage to stand up for my own values and be like, this is what I stand for. This is what we need in a marriage. And if you can't handle that, then we need to move on. But obviously I grew up just like Mallory. Divorce wasn't even an option. I hadn't even thought about it ever. I wouldn't even say the word. Like, it was not something we joked about. I joked about. And so when, like, even after she cheated on me multiple times, I still was willing to forgive her and try to work things out. And I think she just was waiting for a better option to come around, and finally it did. She moved in with another guy, and once she had that stability from another man, she was done with me. And it was hard because she had a hard time breaking ties completely. And I think that happens a lot. People want to hang on to things from their past when they're not fully secure in what they have. And so our divorce process went, like, she was on board with the divorce process, but she kept trying to delay it, kept trying to come up with excuses not to sign the papers. She lied about having a lawyer, and was like, so I had to wait for her lawyer to reach out to me. That never happened. But yeah, I think ultimately what led to our divorce was consistently dishonest. She would lie about even the littlest things, the smallest things that didn't make sense to me. She would lie to friends and family about everything, and she just wanted to get her own way, but she wasn't willing to be honest about it, and that was really hard. And so, yeah, eventually we finally signed divorce papers, and I started my healing process. It was a long road. It still is. That's not something you really get over, but it's something I had to go through because I was able to recognize what I did and the mistakes that I made. And I could focus all day long on the things that she did wrong and things that she did to hurt me. But ultimately, I can't control what she does. I can only try to learn and grow from that. And so I wrote down what I expected in my next marriage. I wrote down my expectations, what I needed, what I knew I wanted from my spouse. And I also wrote down my core beliefs, who I am, and wrote down the roots of who I am, and made sure that I was not going to be moved from that. And so after I got remarried, I met this girl, and I felt a little unsure about my own decision, because I was afraid to make a decision to marry somebody and have it go wrong again. And so I was like, I'm just trusting in Heavenly Father. So I prayed about it, and she talked about marriage really fast, and we ended up getting married after like 3 months of knowing each other, because I felt prompted that the Spirit was telling me the right thing to do. And I think Heavenly Father wanted me to learn the lessons from that marriage too. There's a reason that He said yes. Sometimes people get really discouraged because, like, Heavenly Father told me that was the right choice, and it wasn't. But it was part of God's plan for me to go through that second failed marriage, because we talked about all my expectations and everything that we wanted in a marriage. And as soon as we were married, she completely disregarded all of that. And her ex came back into town that she had. They weren't married, but they had a child together beforehand. And he was out of town, I guess, and came back into town. And as soon as he came back into town, her whole attitude changed. Her whole personality just 180 switch immediately. She started picking fights randomly. She started looking for random things to blame me for, things that didn't make sense in my mind, that were just kind of absurd. She tried picking fights constantly. She would randomly disappear for long periods of time, and with no explanation. And she didn't really trust me anymore. And I think there was, looking back on it, it was pretty obvious that she wanted to be with her ex instead of me, and was just looking for excuses to be with him. And at this point, I was planted strongly in what I expected and what I needed, that I didn't let her shake me. I didn't let her manipulate me or try and change who I was. I said, this is who I am. I know I have flaws. I'm willing to work on them if you want to work on them with me. However, I'm not going to divert my focus on God. I'm not going to divert me being a good father just so that you can feel justified in what you're doing. And so she left me right after Christmas. Great timing, huh? And she went to be with her ex. And I found out later that she came back as soon as I had the divorce papers ready. She signed them without question. She had no hesitation or anything, and she disappeared. And then probably a week before our divorce was finalized, she reached out. She was like, hey, what are the chances that you would reconsider and cancel our divorce papers? And at that point, I was like, no, I don't trust you anymore. I don't trust that you're not just going to leave the second something else comes around. And at that point, I didn't know that she was with her ex, but I was pretty confident because of the timing lining up. And I was like, we can start over from the beginning, and we can go through the dating process, and we can date for like a year and get to know each other again and see if you're willing to make the sacrifices and prepare for a wedding, a true, real marriage. And she didn't like that answer. She disappeared. And as soon as the divorce papers were finalized, she blocked me right away. And then I later found out that she married her ex that next week. As soon as she knew that the divorce papers were finalized, she went and got married to her ex, and then moved away. And I haven't really heard anything from them since. I I've heard rumors about them, but I don't have any evidence of what actually happened other than that they got married afterwards. So I think, yeah, that one was crazy. I didn't really have a choice in either of my marriages, to be honest. They both decided to leave me and choose different paths. And honestly, I think I was okay with that. And I'm glad that I was able to grow and learn from those experiences as well. So we've talked about reasons for our divorces were dishonesty, not a willingness, a lack of willingness to change or grow and work on difficult things. And I think those are really important. If you're willing to work with somebody and actually put the action into change, it doesn't matter if you're perfect. You don't have to find a perfect relationship, but you have to have that willingness to grow and work and improve. And the whole sentiment of like, oh, I'm good enough the way I am. It's like, yes, you are good enough. However, there's so much potential for you to grow. And if your spouse is growing and you're not, you're going to be torn apart.
Yeah.
And so you have to have similar goals in order to work things out. So what do you feel like are different reasons that you would suggest to people? I know we wouldn't really just tell somebody to get a divorce.
Yeah.
But in extreme cases, what do you think people coming to you asking if you feel like their divorce would be justified, what would you tell them?
Like I said in the beginning, I think any form of abuse that's a reason to either get out immediately or seriously consider divorce. You need to be safe. You need to protect yourself. So abuse of any kind, you're justified in getting yourself into a safe situation, for sure. Another one that we've kind of touched on, but I've taken on as a reason that I find would be justified in my own life is, like you said, an unwillingness to change and grow. That something you talked about, but I also experienced, was that the promises of, yes, I'll do it, yes, I'll change, but then the action's not backing it up. So I think both of us stayed in our marriages a lot longer because we were hoping that those words were gonna be followed through on, and they never were. So I think that a lot of people can be kind of passive or a little bit wishy-washy, and that can be hard. But I think in our situations, it was the big things that they were promising and not delivering on, the fidelity and things like that. They weren't willing to make those changes that were necessary. So I think that's a big one. I don't remember exactly how it's phrased, but in that same talk you mentioned earlier, President Oaks talks about how the solution to problems in your marriage, for the most part, it's not divorce, it's repentance. And so I feel like if your spouse is unrepentant, then a divorce might be your answer. If you can't, we were talking about this last night, where there's that triangle of, if you and your spouse are working towards God and growing closer to God, then you'll grow closer together. But if you're trying to grow closer to God and your spouse isn't, then you will be distanced from your spouse. There will automatically be a divide between the two of you. So I think if you're able to find that repentance and work towards that together, then there's hope. But if they're truly unrepentant and not willing to make any of those changes, then something's got to give. That was a huge thing for me, is, are you willing to go to counseling? And a lot of people that have reached out to me and asked for advice about their struggles in their marriage, I've said that. I've said, well, what are they willing to do to change? Are they willing to go to counseling? Are they willing to set boundaries? Are they willing to do XYZ? And a lot of these women have said, no, I've tried. They're not willing to do these things. And that's a really hard situation where it can't be my decision, but I would seriously consider your options there.
Absolutely. I like the way that Dave Ramsey said that their actions are their language. What they do speaks much more than what they say.
Yeah.
And they can make promises all day long, but if you truly love someone, you're gonna make those changes and those commitments to somebody, and make those sacrifices. And so the specific, if you are in this situation where you're considering, do I consider divorce? How do I fix what's going on in a marriage? What do I need to do? I absolutely recommend read the talk Divorce by Dallin H. Oaks, President Dallin H. Oaks, April 2007. And this is a specific spot, I think is what you were just talking about. His quote, he says, "Now I speak to married members, especially to any who may be considering divorce. I strongly urge you and those who advise you to face up to the reality that for most marriage problems, the remedy is not divorce, but repentance. Often the cause is not incompatibility, but selfishness. The first step is not separation, but reformation. Divorce is not an all-purpose solution, and it often creates a long-term heartache. A broad-based international study of the levels of happiness before and after major life events found that on average, persons are more successful in recovering their level of happiness after the death of a spouse than after divorce. Spouses who hope that divorce will resolve conflicts often find that it aggravates them, since the complexities that follow divorce, especially where there are children, generate new conflicts." I think that's so important. And that was a discussion I had with my second marriage. Is she told me that she wanted to take a break or be separated for a little while after she was picking all these fights, and we got in one big fight that she finally got her wish, and I engaged in an argument, and she decided that we needed a break and she wanted to move out. And I read her this talk. I'm like, if we want to work on this, if we want to fix this, we need to come together, work as a team, and figure out a solution. Figure out what are we willing to do, what are we willing to work together on, and make goals. And she wasn't willing to do that. And that was the moment I was like, yeah, the way she said it, she said, "I agree with what you say, and I agree that makes sense, but I still want to be separated right now." And to me, that showed that she knew what the solution was, and she knew what she was doing, and she still chose something else. And that was really hard. However, in some situations, hopefully most situations, both parties do want to fix things.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, I'd recommend you sit down, say, hey, something needs to change. I'm going to write down my expectations of what I'm missing out in my marriage, what our relationship needs. You do the same, and we'll put these together, and we will fix and change what we need to make each other feel special, heard, and important, and spend time together, be closer together.
Now, in my marriage, I did that. I wrote down the list of things that I was lacking, that I needed, and I then just turned into a floor mat and was like, it's okay, do whatever you want, like, walk all over me, I don't care. And so we got nowhere because I wasn't able to hold those boundaries. So I think in a lot of cases, it can be helpful to have some sort of mediator, whether you sit down with the bishop and say, these are the boundaries that we're setting, just so there's someone else there. But in most cases, bishops aren't therapists. They don't necessarily know what they're doing. I have had multiple bishops that were dentists, and so they're not qualified to help me with my marriage. So I would suggest finding a counselor in a lot of cases, to have that third party that can hold you both accountable and and be consistent there. That was something that really helped me, because even though those boundaries weren't enforced, I still had someone that knew that I had set them and knew that someone else, another person that could be a witness to that. And our specific marriage counselor, every single session, and this isn't going to be for everyone, and I don't think that this is going to be advice for everyone either, but he helped me a lot, because every single session he said, it is okay if you want to get a divorce. It is acceptable. It is an appropriate thing to do in this situation. And that gave me a lot of confidence, because there were a lot of people and a lot of my internal voice saying, it's not okay, it's not allowed, you're gonna go to hell if you get a divorce, And so that was really something that supported me through that crazy decision. And honestly, I could tell he was kind of proud of me after, so I was grateful for that support too. But yeah, I do think you need to set those boundaries and have those expectations in your marriage. And if you can be kind of spineless like me, you might need some support in that.
And that's not a list of demands,
No.
you need to change this. It's a team effort. These are the things that I need, and these are the things I'm willing to work on with you.
Yeah.
And because I know marriage specifically that one of the people just gave their spouse a list of demands, you need to change these things, otherwise I'm not going to move back in with you. She just left. She's fix these things or else we're done. And he did. He went and did everything on the list, and it still wasn't enough for it. That was really hard.
Yeah. But I do think it's important to have some sort of if-then about it. Some sort of consequence seems harsh, because you're not your spouse's parent. But something that will happen if the boundaries aren't kept, if you're not respected, and if the expectations aren't met. That was something that I fell short on, was we're doing this, or we're making this plan, and then it didn't happen, and the promise wasn't kept. And then I would just say, oh, it's okay, we'll try again next time. And so then I just kept having those boundaries crossed and those promises broken. So I don't necessarily know what the right answer was in my situation, but I think some sort of, again, consequence sounds harsh, but some sort of consequence.
Yeah. I think a lot of the times too, we think we've talked about our expectations for the other person, and we haven't made it clear enough. And I think it's important to make sure, and it can ease your mind too, if you're going through a divorce, if you know you've set your expectations and you know that they're choosing to disregard them.
Even having it written down can help, because, like you said, then there's no denying it. I did say this, they did promise this, I'm not going crazy, I'm not just thinking I said it, there's some reality that you can rely on.
Absolutely. And I think it's really easy. My sister talked about the guilt that she felt after divorce. She felt the shame, and she got shame from other people who talked badly, that thought they wanted to be involved in their divorce or whatever. But it's important to recognize that you're not a bad person for expecting a good relationship.
Right.
You shouldn't feel shameful for having expectations and wanting to be happy. And if somebody truly loves you, they're going to make those sacrifices, and they're going to at least put in an effort to make you happy. And I love one thing that Mallory and I did. We did a 30-day writing challenge. Every day we wrote something new, and one of the prompts was to write about 10 things that make you happy, or 10 things to do to make us happy, or something like that. And I saved it. And so I have a cheat sheet specifically that tells me exactly what to do if Mallory's having a bad day, or if she's struggling, or even if I just want to make her happy for some random reason, which wouldn't be random because I always want to make her happy. but it makes it so much nicer because I have it written down, so I know exactly like if I want to make Mallory happy, do these things.
Yeah.
And she has the same list for me, which is really cool. And that's so important. And if somebody wants to be with you and wants to have a happy relationship, and if you are struggling with this, if you're thinking about like, oh, what am I getting out of this relationship? Maybe try serving and making your spouse as happy as possible.
Yeah. I think Elder Oaks hit on that you have to have selflessness in your marriage. If you're struggling, it's probably because you're being selfish or they're being selfish. And that was a huge issue, is the selfishness. Both of us would say, but what about me? But what about me? But what about me? And our counselor would be like, hey guys, you're doing great, but you're focusing on yourself again. Try to focus on the other person. And at one point, the counselor even said, I think your time here would be better spent, and your time at home would be better spent if we focused on Mallory's needs a little bit more. And that was honestly huge for me, and because I did feel like I was being completely neglected, and my needs came before his wants, is what I felt, or came after his wants. His wants came first. That's how I felt in my marriage. And so having another person say to my ex, hey, you need to be a little less selfish, a little bit more aware of your wife, was reassuring for me, which was again helpful in the process of divorce, to be confident in my decision. But I think in your situation, you kind of had a similar problem, and you took on that, you call it love bombing, and maybe it was, but you took on that I'm going to serve her, I'm going to love her mentality. And I think that if you both have that, if both of the spouses have that, it can really work to just forget yourself and love the people you're around, love your spouse, love your kids. It can be so much better, but again, it has to be both of you. You have to both be in it. You have to both be serving. Otherwise, like in the situation I was in and the situation you were in, we were serving, we were loving, but then it just got even more out of balance because they were receiving everything that they had to give and everything that we had to give, which isn't going to be helpful in a marriage.
Yeah. It was pretty crazy when Mallory moved to Utah for the first time, and she was hanging out with me for the day. We've been hanging out every day, which is amazing. But there was this moment where she used my restroom and swapped out the toilet paper without being asked. And it was so weird because I have always felt like in my marriages, in my relationships, I've always been like serve, give them attention, give them love, do nice things for them, take things off of their burden. But I don't really know how to receive that, which is really sad to think about. But it was so nice that like even something so simple as putting a fresh roll of toilet paper in the bathroom, that just the tiniest act of service, I recognized that, and it made her happy that I recognized it. Yeah. So it's important to recognize when people do nice things for you. But it's also those little things, even simple things, and recognizing them, it makes it so happy. It's not hard.
Yeah, and I love you so much, but that wasn't me trying to serve you. That was me just doing the normal considerate thing.
I know.
But now, every time I do something like that, it grows my love, because I'm like, he's going to appreciate this, because even though it's something I would do in my own house, he's going to notice and appreciate it. So I love that.
Yeah, and it makes her want to do more things when I get excited about the little things. Yeah. So, but I really do get excited, though. I don't have to pretend at all. I get excited every time she helps me with things, and it makes me happy. And she recognizes the little things that I do for her, and it makes me feel needed and loved and appreciated.
Definitely.
And I think every relationship is different. And we're not going to tell anyone specifically get married, don't get married. That's not our choice. And I think your bishop's not going to tell you that either.
No,
Hopefully.
for sure. Maybe in an extreme circumstance.
Yeah.
They might.
Yeah, however. But it's so important to recognize your needs. Work as a team. You're a team. You should be a team. And work together to create a solution. Write down your needs, have them write down their needs, help serve each other in every little way. And
I think too, if you both write down your needs and just swap it, don't think about your needs anymore. Take on your partner's needs as your needs. Then this is what I have to do to help our marriage and fix our problems. And I'm not worried about the other list anymore. That can help with that selfish attitude and then help you be more focused on your partner.
I really like that. That's a great idea. Because sometimes we share our needs and then we're like, okay, you're not doing enough.
Yeah.
Even though they possibly are trying. And maybe if you give them 5 or 6 needs and they're focusing on one at a time, and you're like, oh, well, these other needs aren't being met. Like, well, what are you doing to fulfill their needs? Yeah. And honestly, if they're not even willing to sit down and write down their needs or read your needs, that's probably a good indication that they're not going to try.
And another thing is some of the needs some of the things that we feel are needs might not be needs. It might just be something we want. And so we might have to work with our partner to kind of reevaluate and prioritize our desires to realize what we actually need to better ourselves and better our relationship, and what areas we're letting that selfishness creep in.
I think as you work together as a team, you can recognize those. There are some things that I would definitely say don't be flexible on.
Yeah, for sure.
Like I have this rule about exes, not like there's no need to be friends with your ex unless you have kids together and co-parenting.
But that's not even a friendship.
That's not even a friendship. It's just a working relationship. Yeah. But yeah, that was one thing with my second marriage. She was friends with all of her exes, and I was really bothered by that. And she didn't seem to care that I was bothered by it. She's like, "Well, you're just being insecure." And it's like, oh no, that's an experience I've had in the past with my previous marriage, and that's something that's unacceptable to me. And if you're not even willing to unfriend an ex for your spouse, then you really need to reevaluate your differences.
Yeah.
Which brings me to the next question, or I guess the next expectation is I've had a lot of people that don't really agree with this in order of what's important or who's the most important. I'm trying to think of the word. What is that word?
I don't know what you're trying to say.
A priority. That's the word. Who's the top priority in your life? Like in organized. But who would you say is your priority list in order from top to bottom?
Are you asking?
I'm asking you. I want to know your opinion. I'm pretty sure we have the same answer, but.
Well, I feel like if you put God first, that will kind of help everything else fall into place. But then your spouse, for sure, if you come first. And then the kids. And they're just kind of kids. There's not a kid that goes above the other. But then after that, there's other family and friends that can kind of fall into place afterwards. But God, and then you, and then the kids.
Mm-hmm. I've had some people that swap the kids and your spouse, saying that kids are more important than your spouse. What would you say is the reason behind putting your spouse first?
I think that I can understand maybe where some people are coming from when they say that, because sometimes a kid's need in the moment is more urgent than yours. Like, oh, they just fell down and are bleeding. They can't help themselves. If you fell down and you were bleeding at the same time, I would go help the kid first. Not because you don't come first, but because you can help yourself a little bit better than that 2-year-old,
I sure hope so.
Yeah. So I can maybe see where they're coming from there, but ultimately, I'm sealed to you first. They're going to be sealed to their spouses, and I love that. But our eternal bond, you and I first. 100%. And when they grow up and leave, what am I going to do then? Shift back to you and go, I love you still. Like, you want to hang out again? You know, like I gotta put this first so that we can have a strong foundation. And if we're working together, the kids will be so much better off. You and I have that strong partnership, and we'll be able to figure out how to help the kids better than we ever could on. If we're putting them first, it's like we're approaching parenting separately, if that makes sense. So as far as that goes, I think in relation to the kids, it's best for us to put each other first, but also in relation to our personal relationship, we need to be there for each other and help each other, because you're it, you know? This is it. This is the most important connection, partnership we'll ever have. Most important relationship.
You're stuck with me. We can pass our kids on to somebody else eventually.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I think the kids really see that too. When you have a strong relationship with your spouse, they want to emulate that, and they learn from the example that you showed them.
Definitely.
And I think that's really great. And if both you and your spouse are happy and taken care of, and you take care of your spouse, then it's a lot easier to take care of your kids too.
Definitely.
Because you're both on the same page, you're working as a team, you're both happy. And we've had moments where the kids are just screaming around us, and we're just involved in each other. And we're like, we feel great. Let's tackle this as a team, and we'll take care of all these kids, and we'll be totally fine. And
It's totally fine.
so it's pretty great. Thank you for sharing that. So yeah, we kind of, maybe as a summary, we talked about a lot of stuff here. As a quick summary, if you were to put it into 3 simple steps, what are 3 steps you would recommend in a short summary to help first save your marriage and then decide whether or not you can stay it?
You will only ever save your marriage if you're working together. So first, come together and try to make a plan. See what your partner, your spouse is willing to do to make it better, whether that's counseling or boundaries or going to the bishop or whatever, any of the things. I think that's the most important first step, is to come together and see what you can conquer together. And then make sure that you're doing everything you can to. Make sure that you are staying as close to God as possible and serving your spouse as much as possible and being patient in a really rough situation. Try to find ways to serve and love your spouse. And then pray. Pray for guidance. Pray to know if it's time to leave. Pray to know what steps to take in order to fall in love again, if you can. Include God in all of it.
I read a study recently, and I wrote this down, so I'm glad that you reminded me before we finished. It's a crazy statistic. Only 1 in 7,000, I don't know the exact number, but it was a lot. Only 1 in 7,200 or whatever people who pray together regularly end in divorce.
Yeah.
With an over 50% divorce rate in America, 1 out of 7,000 who pray together, I like those odds a lot better.
Yeah.
You know, it scares me to think that I have a chance of getting a divorce again. But then, wait a second, I can control those.
Yeah.
I can control those stats. 1 in every 7,000 can get a divorce, or won't get a divorce. They would pray together regularly, because as a man, if I'm willing to lead my family in prayer, lead my wife in prayer, that and we'll pray for each other, pray for our needs, pray for guidance. It makes a huge difference. And yeah, so that's probably the most important, to be honest. Pray together. If you're praying together, you're going to work together. You're going to come together. You're going to repent together. And so if you can pray together every night, make it happen. And if your needs aren't being met and you've done all those steps and things aren't changing, then talk to your bishop, talk to a counselor, figure out those next steps. But just know that we love you. We pray for everyone who's going through similar trials. Hopefully you guys can better your marriages and come together, or hopefully you can get into a better situation. And we've been very lucky to get out of bad situations and make the best of it. So don't give up. Know that God loves you. Know that we love you. And there's hope for you.
If you have any specific questions for us, or if you want to share your story, or if you want advice, we don't really know what we're doing, but feel free to reach out. We'd love to hear from as many of you as possible and share more of our story.
Absolutely. So thanks for listening. I know this is a long one, but hopefully you learned a lot. We appreciate you. So we'll see you next time.